my plan for this morning is to talk about how we can communicate with the spiritual world. Can we communicate with the spiritual world? Martinus says, yes, we certainly can. And no, I can't advance my slides. Let me see. Yeah, yes. So I want to focus particularly on this symbol today because it gives a very clear, for me, very clear overview of how we communicate with the spiritual world and with God. And but I want to first focus on the title. In English, it's called The Eternal, Cosmic and Organic Connection Between God and the Sons of God. And I think a lot of words there that need some defining. So he says that the connection with God is eternal, it's cosmic, and it's organic. So what does that mean? It means that we are always connected with God, whether we know it or not, whether we are an atheist or total denier of the existence of God, or we are religious, or we are interested in spiritual science, if we're a microbe or an elephant or a human being or a spiritual teacher, whatever, that connection with God is there all the time. And I'll come back to showing how that is possible. And then he says that this connection with God is cosmic. The word cosmic is the opposite of chaotic. So it means that there is order in this communication with God. There's order in the structure of the universe. It's also cosmic in the sense that it's at all levels in the cosmos. It's in the microcosmos, the mesocosmos, the macrocosmos. There's no level of being that is not in this eternal contact with God. And then it's organic. And that has to do with the fact that it's something inbuilt, something innate. When the animals cry for help, when they're being attacked, it's not something they decide to do, it's just something that happens. It's a sort of organic connection they have with something higher, some higher being. And of course, they can't hope for any kind of help in that situation because the other animals are running away and they're not conscious of any kind of God that can help them. But this cry comes automatically, just like it does. I mean, if we burn our fingers on something and we don't have time to formulate a prayer in words, we'll say, ah! we might gasp or scream or something like that. And that's a human sort of equivalent of this animal's cry. It's an organic request for help from a higher world. So it's organic in the sense that it's not something artificial. It's something that always exists. It's an innate part of our being. Then he said it was the eternal organic eternal cosmic organic connection between God and the sons of God. And here Martinus's definition of God is that God is absolutely everything. There is nothing outside of God in Martinus's world picture. So God is the one all-inclusive, eternal, infinite being in which all the sons of God are contained. And sons of God includes daughters of God. It's a symbolic term. It's biblical, so there's nothing masculine about it. But it's the idea that we are all contained organically within the body and consciousness of God, and this is true of us. We are in what we call the mesocosmos, on this level where of human beings, animals, plants, minerals. They're all sons of God. Pick up a rock, it's a whole bundle of sons of God you have in your hand. It's also true in the microcosmos. So our organs are sons of God, our cells are sons of God, our smaller particles and so on. In the whole eternal cosmos we have within us, an infinite cosmos we have within us, they're all sons of God. And it's true in the macrocosmos as well. So the Earth is a son of God, the solar system is a son of God, the galaxy is a son of God, and so on, upwards in the cosmos. So that was just a definition of some terms. So the eternal, cosmic, and organic connection between God and the sons of God. And this Martinus illustrates on the part of the symbol to the right. Can you see my pointer?
Yes.
Good. So the figure in the middle symbolizes one living being with its eye, this white circle, and its super consciousness, which is this violet color, and the colored pointy bits, and then the organism and consciousness around it. So most of you are familiar with the idea of this X1, X2, X3, this I, the ability to create and experience, and the organism and consciousness. So these three parts of the living being are symbolized here. So this could be any living being. We all contain these basic energies, that is to say, the energy of instinct, the energy of gravity, the energy of feeling, the energy of intelligence, the energy of intuition, and the energy of memory. So all living beings contain all those energies, but in different combinations. And that gives us very different forms of manifestation and very different forms of consciousness. So, for example, a plant would have a lot of instinct, very little intelligence, but that the instinct would guarantee its automatic functioning. Animals and unfinished human beings like us, we are here. So we have a lot of the energy of gravity, which has to do with aggression and killing and breaking things down. And of course, that's also positive because it dominates in our digestive system. So it's very beneficial to break things down. But mentally, it's a kind of fire. It's a kind of aggressive energy. And we all have some energy of feeling, which is the warm heart, it's compassion, it's neighborly love. But it has a cooling, physically it has a cooling effect on this, on this energy of gravity. So those two energies together form our normal temperature, but it's our compassion that will control the amount of aggression we manifest. And intelligence is our ability to analyze our experiences. Intuition is our ability to automatically analyze our experiences and understand them. And and this is the energy of memory, or the energy of bliss. So here he calls it bliss because here we understand the purpose of all the experiences we've had. So it's not just a memory, but it's an understanding of the underlying reason for everything. So anyway, we all contain these energies. So this could be any single living being within the body of the universe or God. So in the Bible it says, in him, meaning God, in him we live and move and have our being. And this is what's symbolized here, because this single living being, be it a plant, an animal, a human being, an organ, a cell, lives and has its being within the organism and consciousness of God. And here on the outer ring, we see God symbolized. So here we have this white ring, which is the collected eyes, the letter I, of all living beings, without exception. So God is present. It constitutes all living beings together. And then the violet color symbolizes the collective creative abilities of this, of all these living beings, both creative abilities and their ability to experience life. And we see that these living beings manifest them through these different kingdoms: the kingdom of memory, or the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and we belong to the the last part of this animal kingdom, the real human kingdom, the kingdom of wisdom, the kingdom of intuition, or the divine world, and again, the kingdom of bliss, where memory dominates. So in him we live and move and have our being. And Martinus says that the result of this, the consequences of this, is that at no point whatsoever are we outside of a communication with God. We're always communicating with God. We're not always communicating with a whole picture. For example, if I'm talking to Elizabeth, I can see on my screen, then I'm talking to one part of God's consciousness. But maybe there's something I want to help with that Elizabeth might not understand, but somebody else would understand. Then I have to talk to another part of God's consciousness. So the individual living beings are not the whole, but together they make up the whole. Yeah. So I think we will go on to these figures on the left. If you look at the 4 figures on the top left, they symbolize 4 particular stages in our connection with God. And of course, there could be many stages in between and so on, but he has pointed out 4 main stages. And the first one here is the so-called primitive human being. I say so-called. These circles at the bottom, each of these circles symbolizes a living being. And the triangle symbolizes the living being. And then we see 2 colors, the yellow and the green, and they symbolize feeling and intelligence. And it's the relationship between those 2 energies he's illustrating here, and they determine our relationship to God, among other things. So we see here that this so-called primitive person has the relationship to God is symbolized by this ray and this question mark. So if we for example take indigenous people living in the bush and living in tribes and so on, and things there are changing so rapidly, so this is maybe rather quickly out of date, but at least there is a stage in evolution where we're like that, where they perceive God in everything. They perceive God in the trees and in the water and in the weather and in the storms and in the sunshine, and it's very instinctual. They don't understand it. That's why there's a question mark. So there's no real understanding, but there is this awareness, and it's based on the energy of instinct, but it's also based on it's the sort of remains of cosmic consciousness from a previous spiral cycle. But gradually, as we evolve, this instinct becomes reduced, and that gives us many challenges in life. Among other things, we can't instinctively find the right food anymore, and we can't instinctively find the right partner, perhaps, and so on. So we have to think in a lot of areas where we didn't have to think before. We have to replace, for example, instinctive eating by nutritional science and that kind of thing. But that's another subject. So here we have the next stage he's portrayed here. And this is the religious person. Here we see that the intelligence has grown slightly in relation to feeling. This being is beginning to think. But in the religious area, he's still a believer. He doesn't understand, he or she. But he's come so far in evolution that he believes in one God, and that's what's symbolized by the yellow triangle up there. He doesn't understand the nature of God, and here we have this phrase, the ways of God are beyond understanding. So, and some people at this stage think one shouldn't even try to understand God. Some people would regard it as blasphemy to even try to understand God. But as the intelligence grows, then you can't resist this urge to analyze things and to understand things. And then we get to this stage, which is the materialistic stage. And this is where intelligence has grown significantly. But at the beginning, when intelligence has grown, then we apply it to analyzing the material world. And we analyze what we can touch and feel, and how we can build houses, how we can create new things, all sorts of scientific things evolve from this stage. So it's actually a very, very valuable stage for mankind, because the whole of our technical evolution is dependent on it. All our inventions, everything we know about everything comes from this growth of intelligence. But we reach a stage where we're crying out to understand why. We talked before we came on air, we talked about horrible floods and natural catastrophes in Florida and so on. I mean, if you've lost your house, you've lost your own children or whatever, even the most confirmed materialist will cry out to God, saying, why? And some will even say, God, if you exist, give me a reason for all this. If you're terribly, terribly ill, even the most ardent materialist will cry out for help. And there's a lovely film called Atonement, based on a book by Ian McEwan. And there's a soldier lying in the trenches on the north coast of France, and he's very, very badly injured. He doesn't believe in God, but at that point he starts praying to God. And I think it's because of this innate connection, which is always there. So even if you're not convinced that God actually exists, one will cry out for an understanding. Anyway, Martinus writes in the little book, The Mystery of Prayer, that if you're in a very, very unhappy situation, it doesn't help you to know the distance to the moon or how fast you have to travel if you're going to reach the bounds of the solar system and so on. So one cries out for a reason, and because one's body of feeling is growing here, in a sense, so that it gets into balance with intelligence, we will gradually reach this stage, which is this cosmically conscious connection with this one God. Now, this one God that one believed in here in this religious stage is replaced by absolute knowledge of this one God. Here one understands the structure of the universe, that nobody is outside the consciousness or organism of God. And one understands that no matter who one meets in life, it's a communication from God in one form or another. So I thought we would look at some of the details about how this communication with God takes place. And here at the bottom left of the symbol, we see 3 rows of triangles, and the triangles symbolize living beings. The orange ones are beings on the physical plane, and the yellow ones are beings on the spiritual plane. And if we look at the first situation here, the numbers are very small here, but this one here is labeled number 1, and this is labeled number 2. And we can see that some flames are emanating from this being number 1. So this is a being who's crying out for help. And he's asking this neighbor, number 2, on the physical plane for help. And either number 2 can't help or won't help. So there's no reciprocation here. So what does he do? Then he prays to God. And this prayer goes up to the spiritual worlds and is heard by beings on the spiritual plane. And of course, the being, if you just look at the right again, all these beings in the high spiritual worlds, they are not physical beings, and they are, in a sense, God's ears. You couldn't communicate with God if you didn't have an organ for listening. This enormous quantity, infinite quantity of beings on the spiritual plane. So one can get into contact with the being that is perhaps most suited to help one with one's situation. See here, the being number 1 has prayed, and the prayer has been heard by being number 2 on the spiritual plane, who then inspires number 3, who's another being on the spiritual plane, to go and help number 1. And just to take a banal example, which I'm a Scot, I've climbed a lot of mountains in Scotland, and you very often hear of situations where someone has fallen and broken a leg, and they're on their own, night is falling, no one else is around, and yeah, there's maybe no mobile connection and so on. So you're lying there, broken leg, you can't get yourself out of the situation. Shouting and yeah, it doesn't help, there's nobody to hear you. So then you pray to God, but then this being number 2 could inspire someone who was on his way home to just go up to just have a look and say, I have to see the view from the top of that peak before I go home. So they go up there, and then they find this person with a broken leg, and he gets help. So that's just one sort of example of how it could be. So and so you see the flames here receiving this impulse from the spiritual world, and the flames going out, emanating towards the being on the physical plane. So this is a very, very common situation. So when people talk to you, you never know. You never know what it is. You never know where this impulse is coming. Yeah, I once walked from my flat to the station, and then I walked past a nursery school, and this little girl said something to me, totally unprovoked, and she said something absolutely beautiful. I thought, where on earth did that come from? But you know, I thought about this connection. She said something that was very helpful for me at that time. She must have been about 4 or 5 years old. So you never know. Okay, the next situation is you see the being number 1 has green flames this time, and this symbolizes a very highly developed scientist, artist, politician, whatever. And we can see this is a situation where he gets inspiration. So we can see that he's in connection with being number 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. So there's a whole host of spiritual beings inspiring this person. So he can suddenly get an idea. He can suddenly get a solution. I have an example from my old life as a musician. We had to compose when I was studying at the conservatory. I'm no composer. So I asked our teacher, how on earth do you compose? And he just said, in all seriousness, well, you sit at the piano and you wait until an angel sits on your shoulder, and then you write down what the angel says. I thought, okay, but no angels sit on my shoulder when I write to compose. But that's how he did it. And he was an ingenious composer, wonderful composer. And you could really hear the angels sing in his works. So, but it could be you're a politician, you need a solution to a particular situation. Could be you sitting on the council of the Martinus Institute or in some other group, and you need solutions, good solutions to situations, and you can get a communication that way. So this is inspiration, where the impulses come from the spiritual world to the being on the physical plane. But a highly developed artist or politician or whatever can also get intuitive glimpses, and I think I'll come back to that. Intuitive glimpses where they get some sort of access to the solution to the mystery of life themselves. If I get time, I'll come back to that. The next situation is mediumism. And I should stress that this is not something Martinus recommends. He regards it as rather dangerous, but it nonetheless exists. If you can see this being on the right here, number 4, this is perhaps someone who has lost, let's say it's a woman who's lost her husband, and the flames are going out towards this being number 3, who is a medium on the physical plane. This medium can go into a trance and get into contact first with a medium on the spiritual plane who's there to protect him or her, and then keep losing my marker. and then contact with the husband. So the husband is number 1, the wife is number 5. So the husband can speak through the spiritual medium and then the physical medium to the wife on the physical plane and say, perhaps, I'm still alive, life goes on after the physical world, I'm okay, and by the way, I left $1,000 in the drawer, bottom drawer or whatever. You know, there are all sorts of messages that come through this way. But it's a dangerous process for the medium because they get overtaken by these spiritual forces. And when you go into a trance, you never know what you open up for. So just because you're dead doesn't mean you're a fully developed human being. So there can be all sorts of unfinished human beings on the spiritual plane who are looking for an opportunity to possess people on the physical plane. So that's what you open up for here, and it can really make you very ill if that happens. The final situation here is the cosmically conscious connection with God. Here again, we see the flames have turned green. Here we have this perfect balance between intelligence and feeling, as we saw up here. Here you live in a constant connection, conscious connection with God and angels, spiritual beings. So you can't hear a whisper or the trees moving or anything without perceiving it as God moving around you. Every single experience is an experience of God. So I have a few more slides, so I'll rather quickly go through them. Martinus says here, prayer or praying to God is thus not rooted in any human invention, but is an innate, cosmic, organic ability through which the being is eternally and organically connected to the Godhead. Whether or not the being is conscious or unconscious of this unshakable cosmic connection with the Godhead does not alter the principle at all. And he says here, prayer absolutely does not exist to prevent the evolution of the being towards perfection and light. He means by that you can't use prayer to take away the dark experiences. If we didn't experience darkness, we would never experience light. So prayer can't remove the darkness in itself, but it can help us deal with it. He says here, it exists as a means through which the human being can invoke help to be enriched with strength and inspiration to take part in God's influencing, God's modeling of itself in the direction of the great goal, the human being in God's image after his likeness. So the idea of all our experiences of life, and not least the painful ones, is that we perfect our consciousness so that we become in God's image after his likeness. That means that we reach a stage where we can only manifest good, so to speak. And God, through our painful experiences particularly, is modeling us in that direction, like making a figure, this figure of man in God's image. And we can use prayer to sort of say, okay, I agree to this project. I want to be part of this project, and I want to consciously work on modeling my consciousness so that it becomes in God's image. So then God's modeling of your consciousness and your own modeling of your consciousness are sort of on the same track, if that makes sense. So through prayer, it's possible to be happy in dark situations and experience them as a good thing, albeit an extremely unpleasant good thing sometimes. So I'm not denying that things can really, really hurt. But if you can see some sort of meaning in them, if you can see that, okay, I'm getting something out of this, I'm developing my humaneness, I'm developing my compassion, and developing my ability to be empathetic towards others, then you can see that there's a direction in it, and it is easier to go through things if you see that something is being born. Like a woman can go through very, very painful childhood, but childbirth, but she knows that a baby is going to come out of it, and the goal makes it easier, not easy, but easier to go through the pain. And you can reach a stage where you even feel a need to thank God for your dark experiences. It's through the perfect experience of darkness that we become totally wise. Without 100% knowledge of darkness, we would not be able to experience 100% light. We wouldn't be able to manifest it either. So here's a quote: "The principle and structure of prayer is an open door to God and the highest worlds, irrespective of how far one has sunk into darkness, Armageddon, or hell. Through this open door to the kingdoms of light or paradise, God listens to his eternal Son in his hour of need. And through this open door, he takes in his unhappy son to his heart." I like that quote. It makes me feel sort of embraced by life. Actually, I've just visited a sculptress in the north of Jutland, and she had made a beautiful sculpture called The Eternal Embrace. And it was this angel with 4 arms going around, and it made me think about this idea that we are constantly embraced with life, even if it doesn't feel like it. So I mentioned cosmic glimpses before, and Martinus talks about the baptism of Christ. Here we have a painting where Christ is being baptized. And at this point, he experienced God as his father. This was a very, very important cosmic glimpse. Here's a quote from Meditation by Martinus. So during this experience, God said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Through this experience, this cosmic glimpse, Jesus experienced God as a father. And this father-son attitude to the Godhead became the foundation for the whole of the life and teaching of Jesus. Now, this was something totally new, because before, who would have dared call God Father? We had this idea of a God judging Adam here in William Blake's picture, where God was punitive and angry and vengeful and so on, and not at all the loving Father that Christ talked about. So this was an absolute turning point for mankind, that he experienced and expressed God as being this loving Father. And of course, if you want a good relationship with your loving Father, then you talk to him. So Martinus encourages us to pray. And he says in Liebesbo 1 that the purpose of Liebesbo is to guide the seeker after truth to the understanding of the daily experience of life as being identical with a communication released by providence and especially adapted to him personally, a communication that the individual in question will gradually be able to reflect on just as easily as he is now able to reflect on a communication with his equal fellow beings. So when we experience something, anything, when we experience everything, God is talking to us. God is saying something. Things are not meaningless. There is a purpose behind everything. And of course, it's not always easy to understand the purpose, but we can reflect on it just as easily as we can reflect on what one person or another said to us. So this was the purpose of Liebesbo, to help us reflect on our experience of life and bring our experience of life and our creation of life into harmony with neighborly love. Yeah, I think my time is up, so I'll stop there.